The Called and Served podcast is not affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guest and do not necessarily reflect the official doctrine or position of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. For more information, please visit the official website of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at churchofjesuschrist.org. Welcome to the Called and Served podcast by me, Mike Magee. Today's guest is Bishop Nielson from the Rye Ward, currently serving as a high councilman in our stake. And he is married with 3 children, currently a writer, working on some works. And he served his mission in Argentina, Bahía Blanca, from 1988 to 1990. Welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah.
This is a great opportunity.
Yeah, no, when I was doing this, putting it together, actually Joel, my brother-in-law, he was like, "Oh, you got to have Bishop Nielson in there." And you served in the area, Bahía Blanca. That's down there by, I don't know much of the geography, but you mentioned it. It's got Patagonia down there.
Yeah.
That's kind of like is it a big rock climbing or what?
So Americans would know it as, I guess, the clothing brand and the outdoor life. It's kind of just a big region that takes up about half of the country. Argentina is kind of a neat place because you can have coastal, you have almost arid desert, and then you have mountainous up against Chile. So
right,
but yeah, the middle part of the country is called the Patagonia. And somebody in America thought that'd be a cool name.
Right.
Name something.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought it was just the mountain, like the Andes or something like that. Okay. So it's an actual region of Argentina. Okay. Well, that's pretty neat. But yes, most people would know it as the brand.
The jackets.
Yeah. That are not cheap. Not a sponsor. But so where are you originally from?
So I was born in Arizona. And because of some marriage changes, we bounced around a lot in my childhood.
Okay.
And spent time in California and Utah and Virginia. But the shorter answer is I grew up my younger years in California and junior high and high school in Utah.
Yeah. Okay. And then growing up coming from, I guess, more of a blended family. Is that...
We used the term Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch.
In the 70s,
yeah, that's true.
Today you say
true.
blended.
Yeah. That is true. The Brady Bunch. Were both sets or family, were they LDS, or was this something, or members of the church, or is that?
My biological father converted before he married my mom.
Okay.
And I think that was a requisite for marriage.
Yeah.
And their marriage did not last. And my adopted father, who came in the picture later on, yes, he was a strong member. Served as a bishop a couple different times.
Really?
And so the family units that I grew up in were both fairly strong Mormon.
Really? Okay, well that's pretty interesting. I would have. I can't, but I converted into the church, but like my parents were also, they divorced when I was younger, and but we were strong, like Catholic, so there was a little bit difference there. But I'm always interested because with that being said, how did that prepare you, or when you were growing up, were you thinking of a mission, or was that something that, who influenced you, or how did you feel like you were ready to, like you wanted to serve when you got old enough?
100% thinking of serving. My grandfather. So I spent some time with a single mom, right? Mm-hmm. And my male role model at that point, because I was the oldest boy, was my maternal grandfather, and he did not serve. He was a convert also. But my adopted father, he did serve, and I cannot remember a time in my life where I didn't envision myself being a missionary. And I had 3 older brothers, all served. One of my big sisters served, and I couldn't wait. It was something I wanted to do my part, and when it was my turn to step up, I was going to. And I tell people it was always a matter of when, not if.
What, not if? Yeah,
never if.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I started doing this podcast, because it seems like there's more of an if today versus when I joined the church, and then it was like all I remember is like mission, and like how great it is, and not like that peer pressure, like, if you don't go, you're not gonna, succeed, or, but just like how positive it was. And it seems like that there's more ifs today. I don't know if you've noticed that, or.
I would agree with that. And as the father of 3 sons, 2 of them weren't real gung-ho about serving missions. So only one of my 3 kind of felt the same way I did. So yeah, even in my little sample size, I would agree with that. But also, just in the leadership positions I've been in, it's more of a decision.
Right.
It requires a little more for them to step up and do it, as opposed to, I grew up in the President Kimball era of, we're doing it.
Right.
Let's go.
Yeah. And that was kind of, because I joined with President Hinckley, and it was like, that was, going, every member is a missionary.
Yeah.
That was his big, I remember his big push, and going out there and doing that missionary work. And I always felt it, coming back from my mission, just felt how important that was in my life. And granted, and I say this every episode, and I always want to make sure that it's clear that, President Nielsen reiterated, if you're able, and it's in the church handbook, and, and there's reasons why individuals can't, but that's not for me to judge or anything like that. But that's more of, you should get out there and serve if you're able to. There's so many people needing the gospel or waiting for it and don't know it, and I think it's amazing to see the missionaries out there when they do go. How would you feel about, like, you were saying, like, you had like 2 sons, and I'm just kind of curious that maybe, they weren't seeking it, but did they end up serving, or, if you don't mind, if
my oldest did not, he aborted fairly early on.
Yeah.
My youngest, who was wavering, did, and had a pretty cool experience that convinced him that it was what he was supposed to do. That was what I wanted to ask, if kind of wait, and I just didn't know, but then they ended up going, what was that for them? Like, what was that? His experience?
Yeah, that
he loved it.
Yeah.
So my youngest went to Mexico, and his first 4 to 6 months were, I don't know, typical, I guess, of culture shock, homesickness.
Right.
You just, I don't know, indecisive language problems. And then one day we're on a video call with him, and he informed us, this is like 5-6 months in, and he informed us that he had extended a month already of his mission. And I kind of turned to my wife like, all right, I guess he's enjoying it.
Yeah.
That's a decent sign.
Yeah.
But then he came home and told us that he had some serious problems, but he got through them.
Yeah.
And he served a great mission and loved it, and came home wanting to move to Mexico. And,
right.
He had a great time.
Yeah, I remember that was kind of like me. I remember that was the same thing. Like, I was ready to move to Portugal or Africa, and but it was like obviously not feasible or reality. But and if I could have extended, I would have, but that's, and I think, like you were saying with your grandfather and instilling, I guess, in you those values, did you find any of those values growing up that you were like, that just made it confirm that, yes, submission is what I need to do?
I would say that all the men I looked up to, well, I shouldn't say all, because my grandfather didn't have a chance to, but mission was, in my mind, was never equated to anything negative. It was always a positive. It was, best 2 years. It was men and women, I guess, but men talking about, I learned that on my mission. I came back this much better. I acquired this, and there was nothing negative about that. I wanted what they had. I wanted that experience. I wanted to wear that name tag. For me, I mean, not FOMO, but God, it's my turn. When I'm 19, I'm going, and I want to do my part for this cause.
Yeah.
There was almost an obligation sense in me of, allow me to chip in.
Yeah. And I think that's a generational thing too. Not trying to compare the generations, but there is at that time, I think, feeling of like you said, the obligation of wanting to do it and knowing, and it sounds like your testimony was already strong. Like this is what I want to do. There's a reason for me to do it. Like you said, Kimball's era and, all the way up until now. So, I think it's such a, missions are such a important aspect of, I guess, growing into the church. I think you could still grow into the church and have very, very spiritual teachings and knowledge and growth. But for some reason on that mission, it's almost like that crash course, right? You kind of just learn everything. Not that you're going to be perfect at it or, all knowing, but it definitely gets you kind of set up in that, for like when I joined the church, I remember I was like, I don't know what any of this means. But then when I finally served, I was like, okay, now it's starting to all make sense.
Yeah. And there's almost a coming of age aspect of, culturally, there's cultures that young men or young people have to go through some sort of I don't know if Australia does a walkabout or the Amish have something where they leave the house, and that, sense is kind of what we go through. Yeah. And, there's this growth that is automatic, it just happens, and I love it.
Right. Yeah. What was your, preparation for it? I mean, I know you were ready, but did you do anything specific or?
I wouldn't say I was ready. I was mentally in.
Okay. All right.
I wish I was a lot more prepared. I'll go ahead and share this part of my story. My timing was accelerated a little bit. So I graduated and went up to Utah State with my best friend. And, back then you did a year of school.
Yep.
It was 19 was our age, and most of us did a year of school, and then we would go. And that was my plan. And I came home. So Utah State was on a quarters schedule, and I came home for Thanksgiving. And you'd have to know my parents, but my mom said something to the effect of, hey, before you leave, you need to sign your mission papers. And I said, I haven't even filled out my mission papers, Mom. And she said, well, Dad has. You just need to sign them. And I was like, it's not time yet. I've still got till May. And she said, no, you're going as soon as you turn 19, which was in March, which cut off the last quarter, the spring quarter for me. It was right after the winter quarter. And so, yeah, I was kind of informed that I was heading out. My dad at the time worked in church headquarters in Salt Lake, was my bishop. And I don't know, looking back, if they maybe feared that I was wavering, or that, being away at college, I might change my mind, because I wouldn't have. I never. But I was having way too much fun in Logan, to be honest with you. It was probably a good thing that they cut that year short for me. But yeah, so I kind of got thrust into it, and I had to kind of get serious. I had to kind of, and the guys at school, teased me a little bit because I started to decline, I'm not going to go to this social activity.
Right.
And, he's going to go back and read the Book of Mormon in his apartment, his dorm room. And, but I was trying my best to kind of make up for maybe sleeping through some seminary classes. And I didn't feel very prepared, other than just my willingness to go. I wasn't a scriptorian. I felt inadequate about maybe teaching, the gospel and a new religion to people and having all the answers. So I felt a lot of inadequacy in that regard. And I tried, my final months at college to kind of buckle down a little bit. But I wish I'd done more.
Right. But how did you deal with that, you're at the college there, and how'd you deal with that peer pressure? How'd you deal with those challenges with that? Because I could totally understand, like, why aren't you coming out? And
I hung out with a bunch of good dudes.
Yeah.
I don't know how well. I went up there with my best friend, right? So already, we had each other's back. And then early on, the first week of whatever, orientation, or I don't know how we got linked in with this group, because there was a group of from about 4 different cities that we just bonded, and every single one of them were just good church-going dudes. And so we never had really much of a bad influence. We were all going to go serve mission. So I guess just some wise decisions on the very, very front end that kind of locked me in. And we didn't get into any kind of foolishness in college other than staying up late,
right?
And, sleeping in, and my grades suffering. But it was from wholesome activities. It really was.
Yeah. Trying to just, like, I think for probably people today, the youth or whatever, trying to find that. I guess we always call it your people, and like people that are going to uplift you. And you might have friends, but I think it's important, like you said, hey, you were around just good dudes, people that they were wanting to go on a mission too, and understood that. And I think that's such an important aspect today, because we've talked about this where in social media, and it's great, it's awesome, like I'm doing a podcast now, or like these things that I would have never thought of doing back in the day with a camcorder, but having a positive influence, and it's okay to let go of people who are not uplifting you.
So my youngest spent his first year of college, beyond what he'd done in high school, but his first real college experience was in Ephraim at Snow College. And he was in a little suite with 5 guys, and the other 4 were all LDS kids and didn't go to church one time.
Yeah.
The whole whatever semester he was there. So yeah, it depends. And I'm fortunate now that my youngest 2, they roomed together. So one's at BYU, one's at Utah Valley, and they have each other's back. So we didn't really have to play any kind of lottery and see who they ended up with. So that was awesome.
Yeah, and we're kind of in that same situation with our oldest, she's at college right now, and then our second child is a senior, and we're trying to convince her, like, hey, go live, go to Alabama, and
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and then you guys could stay, live together, and that's, I think, like an awesome.
It's reassuring as a parent.
It is reassuring as a parent, but so here you are, college prepping. What about when you get your call? I'm always interested in how that went down, especially with like your family and your parent, especially the mother, because, moms are always,
Well, I'll qualify this by saying this was a long time ago, okay? the world and the whole culture of mission calls looks a lot different.
It does now.
So my dad worked in the church office building, and he had a pattern with all of my older siblings where he would hand deliver their calls.
Really?
And they would never even get in the mail. He would bring them home from work.
Wow.
So I don't know when they actually, and again, you have to remember back in the day, this would have been a paper, a physical paper in an envelope. But they would have finished these on a Monday. And I think he would bring them home on Tuesday, which beat a couple days of postal, right? And he would actually do it for kids in our ward as well.
Really?
He was our bishop. But I'm up in school a couple hours away in Logan, and I kid you not, my mom called me one day and said, hey, Dad's pretty sure this is the week. So what he's going to do is he's going to bring it home, and we'll open it here and we'll call you and tell you where we're going. And I was like, no, that's not how it's going to go. I said, he's going to let that go in the mail and it's going to come to my address up here and I'm opening my own call. So that was a little bit of friction there. So anyway, it did get mailed up to Logan, and I vividly remember somehow he gave me a heads up. It was almost like a Saturday, I want to say, and I knew the day it was coming. He had enough in there, and God, I'm embarrassed to put this on tape, but we didn't wake up real early in college. Okay,
yeah.
But I was so anxious and nervous that I remember waking up like at 7 o'clock. So we were in this big apartment complex that had just a panel of P.O. boxes that you would open at the ground floor. And I went all the way downstairs and checked the mail. Wasn't there, hadn't come, went back upstairs. And I swear, like every hour, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, I kept checking. And I'd go back to sleep. And finally, a knock came on the door. And I went to the door and I looked through the peephole, and it was the mailman. And he had hand delivered. He said, he's got this big white envelope, and he says, I recognize what this is, and I imagine you've been waiting for this. And I said, yes, sir, thank you. So I run back to the back to I think we were the only two at home that weekend, my best friend and I. So I wake him up at this late hour, and I said, and I think my hands were shaking, and I said, dude, I got my mission call. And he said, he was a little bit grumpy and not excited for me, and I guess miffed that I'd woken him up. And he said, are you going to sit there and fondle it, or are you going to open it? And so I left and just went, and the scene for me opening my mission call, I sat on the floor in our front TV room and just opened it by myself and read, Argentina, Bahía Blanca. And I don't remember telling him, but I remember calling my mom and her being super duper excited.
Yeah.
We hadn't had any South American missionaries in my family, and I was the first Spanish speaker in the family. So yeah, just kind of, there was a little bit of celebration there with mom over the phone. And then, God, that's about all I remember. I don't remember how the word got out. I'm sure mom put it
phone
out
calls.
everywhere.
Yeah. Did you, when you saw that, did you do any type of research or?
Oh yeah.
Up, trying to figure out where.
So at that point, okay, so this is 1988. Here's what I knew about Argentina. They were the reigning World Cup champs in soccer. Okay, I don't know.
You knew more than me.
I don't know if the name Diego Maradona means anything, but he was it in world soccer. Okay, so before Lionel Messi, there was Diego Maradona. They had won the World Cup in '86. Gabby Sabatini was a world-class women's tennis player at the time. She was from Argentina. That was about all I knew about Argentina. There was a musical, Evita, that Madonna made into a movie after I was already back.
I remember that, yeah.
And the song, Don't Cry For Me, Argentina.
Yeah.
But other than that, I was the typical, where is that on the map? What is this all about? And I had to do a bunch of research, and this is pre-internet, so
yep.
I don't know if I went to the library and looked at
the
encyclopedia. I don't know.
Trying to get the most recent one. The most recent printed books of the encyclopedias.
I don't remember. My mom probably filled me in on quite a bit. She's a smart lady, but yeah,
Were you wanting to go international or states, or did it even matter?
I told myself that I wanted to go foreign and speak English, which is a little bit silly.
Right.
So in my mind, it was like, Canada and Australia, but I think deep down, I wanted to speak Spanish. I'd taken 4 years of Spanish in high school. I'd done some immersive summer courses at BYU. My mom and I had spent time in Mexico. So yeah, the Spanish angle, and I probably hyped that up pretty well in my papers too. That sat really well with me. And yeah, I wanted to get out. I wanted to, go far away. So that part was neat for me.
Yeah. Did you have to do, I guess it well, say it that way, sorry, but pre 9/11, you did you have to worry about a visa, or did they have to do that for you, or how did that work?
So yeah, I had some unexpected visa problems.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was.
Yeah, so we left the MTC. So back in the day, we spent 9 weeks in Provo, and we flew.
Because you would be learning a language,
Yeah.
so it would be 9 weeks.
If
Yeah.
you're a language, it was 9 weeks. Nowadays, Spanish is like 6 weeks, and the harder languages go 9. So we flew into LA, 12 of us, and for years, I guess, there was kind of this system where it was just rubber stamped, and the missionaries just got their stuff and went. And the week before we got there, the Argentine embassy got a new consul who went to some letter of the law requirement that the church was caught off guard, that there was some paperwork that needed to be signed by your parents before you could get your visa. And Salt Lake was taken aback because it hadn't been enforced.
Right. There was no issue before.
And so we all of a sudden couldn't make our next flight out of LA, and they booked us a hotel, and it was this mad scramble for how quickly parents could get their stuff signed. So elders from California, or elders who had parents with fax machines in their house, or access to, it's funny, I'm going to say this word, but Federal Express was kind of this fancy new thing.
Yeah.
So about half of them went out the next day, and it was only like a 1-day delay. And the other half of us, no joke, they took us to the mission home. I don't remember what mission it was, and basically paired us up with elders, with companionships. And we sat in this room, and one by one, or sometimes in pairs, somebody would come in and they say, "Okay, Elder Johnson, you're with them. Bye." And so me and another elder got paired up, and I started my mission. My first 3 or 4 days of my mission in Lawndale, California. It's where I taught my first lessons, did my first tracting, while we were waiting on this paperwork that eventually my parents were able to get to, like Murdoch Travel, the main travel agency, and we flew out, a couple days later. But that was a big hiccup right at the start that was completely unexpected.
Yeah. I would, because I was thinking, I went out right before 9/11, and it seemed pretty smooth. And then after that, it was just like, I've seen a lot of missionaries have to kind of serve in the States for a little bit before they can get their
Brazilian
visa cleared.
missionaries.
Yeah. Brazilian. Yep. So, like we started having that issue in Portugal where some missionaries were having some visa waits, so, but, well, you get out into the mission field, and what is your first impression? You're getting out there and starting to work.
Let me continue that, because the whole trip down was just a mess. We flew out of LA, I guess 4 of us at that point, who got the second wave of our parental forms. And we flew to Mexico City, had a short little layover. Then we flew to Lima, Peru, and the flights were canceled.
Oh, wow.
Spent the night just sleeping in the airport.
Yeah.
And which caused further delays. And then we finally got a flight, and we were supposed to fly all the way to Buenos Aires. And we don't know what's going on. You're on an airplane, and people are just talking this foreign language.
Right.
You thought you learned Spanish in MTC.
You think you know it.
And then you're like, why aren't they speaking Spanish? And they're announcing that there's bad weather in Buenos Aires and that we're landing in Montevideo, Uruguay. And I'm talking about landing, putting us on a bus, bussing us downtown, putting us in a hotel. It was like bad weather, and you're staying here for a while. There was kind of a neat part of that, because we went downtown, and just 4 gringos who didn't know what they were doing.
Didn't know what they were doing.
We spotted a pizza joint and managed to order ourselves pizzas and sodas, and but then it was like a big change. We got back to the hotel, and it was like a movie scene where the whole like passenger flight people were in the lobby, and there was a chance that maybe we could fly out that night, and there was like a vote. And so, yeah, we ended up, they said, okay, we're going to go in 45 minutes. And I remember running upstairs and taking a shower, like taking advantage that we had this hotel room. And I took a shower and grabbed the stationery so I could write some letters. And so, yeah, so we flew to Buenos Aires that night and landed about midnight. So almost a little more than a day after we should have arrived. In fact, if you count California, a week after we should have arrived, right? And it was about 12:15 in the morning. And I remember we went through customs and we're rounding this corner. And I kid you not, there's these two elders standing at the end of this long hallway. And I'm like, wow. And it turns out they had been there since noon, just waiting for us to land and not leaving their post, right?
Right.
And so that was a little freaky because one of the elders that in our group was serving in Buenos Aires. They drove him right to his apartment, like no mission home, no meet the president, woke up his companion and said, here you go. The other three of us, we went to, I don't know whose apartment they dropped us in, but they pulled out some mattresses and we slept. And the next morning, the two of us that were going a little bit further south, they stuck on a little puddle jumper. And this airport was different because we landed in this other airport and nobody was there. And it was just the two of us looking at each other like, oh my gosh, now what do we do? You know?
Right.
And somehow we had the number for the mission home. And my dad, who worked in the church office building, he did a lot of traveling, and he had given me some currency, some Argentine currency, an Austral. And I was able to change it for some phone tokens, and we called the mission home. And they're like, hey, we've been waiting for you. And so they came and picked us up. And even then, so my mission president was out of town. And so for a couple of days, we were with the APs just bouncing around. And it took 2 or 3 days before I even got to my first area. So on paper, I think it was like 11 days from the MTC to get into my first area of just kind of kookiness and just, weirdness. And I didn't know any better. So, I was kind of rolling with it.
Right.
And then I got to my first area and my companion wasn't there. So, and honestly, I'm going to tell some stories here and it's going to sound like I served in the 30s, but there just wasn't a lot of organization.
Yeah.
And we didn't have phones. We didn't have phones in our apartments. A lot like we didn't have landlines in our apartments. But I got there, and the outgoing elder there was one elder there, and what we called a mini missionary, like a stake missionary. And the elder was on his way out, so 2 of us were coming in new, and I beat my trainer there.
Oh wow!
So I had to wait for my real companion to even show up, which was just I was kind of like, what have I got myself into here? So it started off kind of shaky, just a little bit. Not real smooth, although I did get to meet my mission president before I left. I think that's why we were so long there, is they were waiting for him to fly back. Yeah. And I did, get an interview and my assignment from him. But it just wasn't. Other elders would talk about their group coming in. There was this big dinner and
that's how it was
program.
For me. Yeah.
I didn't get any of that just because of the travel weirdness.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it sounds like an adventure just to get down there.
It was, and a part of me liked it because I could write a big letter to my parents. You're not going to believe this. Look at all this stuff.
Yeah, I bet it was. That would be fun to, I think, to have it that way. Mine was just a layover in England, and then we were in Lisbon.
Boring.
But like you said, it is almost like listening to missionaries, I guess, from like the 30s or whatever. Elder escapes my mind, but he served down in Tonga, I think it was, or Samoa, and he had to get on a boat. Didn't know, just go show up on some island. Yeah, Groberg, Elder Groberg, and hearing those stories, it's like, man, that sounds amazing to me.
Yeah. I got a couple of those.
Yeah. So, but then getting down there and finally starting to getting working and with your trainer, what was that work like down there in Argentina? Were they receptive, or was it still kind of brand new to them? Or
the church had been in Argentina for quite a while, 1950s. So we had a good mix of older pioneer members and the newer. Clearly, the Catholic Church was the big, dominant religion down there. but the evangelicals and Jehovah's Witnesses and the LDS, were making inroads. We had quite a bit. I was in a branch. I was in a really small little town, but there was a lot of work. We immediately were rolling our sleeves up and had a lot of what we used to call investigators, right? People who were listening to us, and there was sufficient. We were not sitting around at all.
Yeah. And what was that work like? Was the members pretty good at like, hey, I got to know somebody, or was a lot of knocking or street contacts?
Back then, we did a ton of tracting. I'm a firm believer in tracting, although I don't know in 2024 how effective it would be. But member referrals wasn't as big a thing back then. I served in one ward where we really benefited from that.
Yeah.
But especially that first branch, that wasn't really a thing. Now, what we would get was you start teaching one family, and they have friends, or a recent baptism would bring in their friends. There were connections based on our work, but not necessarily somebody showing up at church one day and saying, "Hey, I was at the post office," and not much of that.
Yeah, and I've always found member referrals. It was that way in Portugal, where I don't know if it was just more of the confidence or whatever. Like, I know I joined, but I don't know if they'd want to, or I know I have this testimony or feel this way, but I don't know. Kind of the shyness. I think I might do it still to this day. Knowing myself. Like, I don't know if I should talk to my neighbor about it when I probably should, or,
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what, something, and kind of a side note with that is, the importance of teaching that gospel and talking to people, especially as members. Like, my brother joined the church. He lives in Idaho. And I remember when I joined the church in 99, and my parents down in the South, my dad and my stepmom, they had 4 kids, and I never felt as though I should be bringing up religion or talking to them about it. And finally, my brother joins the church later on, maybe 10 years after I joined, and he called me up, and he was like, "Mike, why did you never share the gospel with me?" And I was like, I'll answer for that when I die, but I apologize. It always still hits me to this day. It's one of those. Yeah. Oh, should have.
I probably got some of those coming my way.
Yeah, and you just, in my head, I had it all reasons why I shouldn't, and in reality, I probably should have stepped out of that box,
Yeah.
So, but, and down there in Argentina, did you, teaching the people and getting into their homes, what were some of the things that you found to comparison, or were able to relate to the people down there, so you could say, "Hey, look, we have this Book of Mormon, we have this church and a prophet today." How did you approach that with them?
Well, the single most relatable aspect was Jesus Christ. Okay, so we weren't encountering a lot of people who didn't have a belief in God or a belief in Christ. So that was always our starting point. In fact, we kind of got in a habit when we were tracting, because, as you know, we got the door slammed in our face plenty.
Right.
And ignored, or, not even given the time of day. But this probably predates you, but part of our teaching equipment were flip cards. And we had a little spiral bound packet.
We had that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of those was a picture of Jesus Christ. And we found that when we were at the door, when they opened the door, if we were holding the picture of Jesus Christ facing them, they would slam the door a lot less times.
Yeah.
they felt like they were rejecting something that they already believed in, right? And that was our starting point, is we believe in this too. We want to talk about Jesus Christ with you. And that was the one common ground that in 98% of the instances would resonate with them.
Yeah, because culturally, that's very focused with Catholicism.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ and his sacrifice. So, finding that common ground is, especially with Christ, and then I would assume too, also down there, being such a Argentina and Latin base with Catholicism and all that, family was probably very important. What was that, with them? What was that like?
Very important. Argentina, most of the areas I was in, Argentina is an amazing country with a ton of resources. It has so much natural riches. But when I was there in the 80s, it was going through a rough time. And there were people who I would consider, quote unquote, well off.
Right.
But the majority weren't. They were working class and below. And, family was how they got by, and it's a very Latin-based, they might have multiple generations under the same roof, and you're taking care of your parents or your grandparents. And so, yeah, that part of our message and that huge part of our religion would definitely resonate with them.
Yeah.
Right? And that our belief in family, how important that is to us, our beliefs after death of families being forever, all of that, was music to their ears.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, because Latin, at least from what I know, and being my mom being from Guam, like family is central, and then obviously with Catholicism, Christ and the saints are very important. And, I would assume down there, was there any cultural differences that, when I think Latin, I go straight to Mexico, just because being here in Colorado, kind of that aspect of it, but was there anything really different that kind of their culture or that they did that was different than maybe the other Latin countries?
So I'm going to tell you a funny story first, and then I'll get to your question. I get back from my mission, so I have 3 older brothers, and they have that typical American mindset, right? And they say the topic of food came up, and we ate like kings. It was amazing. And they said, "Oh yeah, well, how did you like having burritos and tacos and rice every meal?" And I'm like, I didn't eat one burrito or one taco.
Yeah.
But in their mind, anything south of Texas is all Mexico. It's just the whole place is Mexico eating burritos, and that was not the case. Argentina is very European influenced. It has a ton of World War II refugees, even Nazi refugees.
Really?
And Italians and Germans, and oh my gosh, we ate so much pasta. If I had to describe Argentine food, it would be pasta and steak.
But not Italian, like they weren't like Italian themselves, or a mixture of?
They would be, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So your typical Argentine person isn't what you'd consider to be, a dark-skinned, native, indigenous. And they do have that, and especially the closer you get to the Andes and Chile. Mm-hmm. But you're Argentine. In fact, Pope Francis right now is Argentine. Trying to think who's made it big nowadays. Manu Ginobili from the Spurs, Argentine. They're kind of a fair-skinned. They're a lot more European than you think,
so
and they do have
influence,
natives.
Huh?
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. But I guess to your question, their culture. Argentine, like I said, they're huge beef producers. America and Argentina are 1-2 in beef producing. They have what's called a gaucho, which is their cowboy. So their man who works the cattle is a gaucho. I'm trying to think what else they're famous for. The tango.
Yeah. What was the music? Was there a specific music type, like mariachi or?
No, I think it's tango. Am I saying it right? Tango.
Tango is a dance, right?
Does that have music associated to it? I don't know.
I think it does. Yeah. Well.
When I was down there, the music that we were exposed to sounded a lot like American music.
Did it?
Yeah.
Was it because of the influence, you think, or?
I think that was just the pop music that was on the radio.
Yeah.
Now older people might listen to something else. I'll tell you what was very known for, and this is probably the case also in Uruguay and Paraguay, was mate. I don't know if you've ever heard of the tea.
Yes. Is that from Argentina?
Yeah.
Argentina? I didn't know that.
So they have their little cup, I guess. It's kind of insulated with a layer of wood, and you put the tea in, but then the straw has a kind of a strainer in it, and all day long they would drink this mate, and you put the leaves in, and then your hot water, and then top it off with sugar, and you pass it around. It's a communal thing, and everybody's drinking from the same straw, and that was huge.
And that was a very,
very big.
But that was the significance there too. Was it was very social, right? A very social thing.
Yeah, it's what you're doing when you're hanging around just chatting. Somebody's is me fixing mate, and you're drinking mate, which we couldn't due to our beliefs, and it was technically tea, so that caused a little bit of, I don't know about angst, but bewilderment from them. Like, wow, you won't even drink our main drink down here.
Right.
But
yeah, especially because, I remember that overseas, and it's funny because I think culturally, like outside of America, tea is in the South, outside of the South of America, but tea is a very significant drink. In Afghanistan and Iraq, chai was a big thing, and I'm sure if you go over, obviously Asian countries and all that,
England,
yeah, tea is very, and I remember seeing something about mate, but I remember them talking like it was a very, like, hey, this is kind of like our thing that we're doing as a community or communal, like you said.
They'll drink it cold, they'll drink it hot, they'll drink it first thing in the morning, they'll drink it last thing at night. It's huge.
I tried it. And it's an acquired taste.
It's definitely an acquired taste.
Yeah. To me, it was a little too raw. I was like, ooh, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And it was still gritty and, but it might have just been the kind I had. So, but when you were down there and finally getting into the mission field and all that, what was your companionships like? Do you have any good ones? Any challenges, struggles, or were they
lots of challenges?
Did you?
Companions who I clicked with immediately, personality wise, which, let's be honest, weren't probably the most productive companionships that I had. Others that we never would have selected ourselves to hang out if we weren't paired up together. But we could be businesslike and take care of our duties that we were supposed to do. It was a little bit of everything. I had 12 companions. I had 6, I'm going to say North Americans, because one was Canadian.
Okay.
And 6 who were Latin from various different countries. I had some older. I had a lot of the 19, 20-year-olds. And I was talking to some prospective missionaries at the stake level within the last few months at our mission prep course, and President Newitt gave me just an open table to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And I talked about getting along with your companions, because it was the one thing that I don't think anybody prepared me for, whether that was pre-mish at the ward level, MTC, and it's 24/7 with this human, then you're just going for it. But so the lesson I learned from that, and this is what I shared with the missionaries here in Pueblo, was, and I think it wasn't until my second or third companion that I realized it, because I was so judgmental, man. It was like, this person is not good at this and this and this, and they're driving me crazy about this and this and this and this. And it was almost like I had to learn, and I'm sure the Spirit was helping me, was, how do you know that you're this perfect person? You're probably driving them crazy in different areas. What can you learn from them? And no joke, Mike, I made a point with each companionship. By the time we were done, and I made a journal entry about each companion and kind of talked about them and stuff, and I tried to find one trait that I could acquire that they had and they were great at, that I wasn't. And that really started to shift everything for me.
Yeah.
Was get off your high horse that you're awesome, and learn from them. That you have this amazing person who's dedicating their life to, these 2 years to help people. And so I started looking for, golly, I want to be more like Elder Blank in this aspect. And that really helped me, even with the challenging ones.
And that's an important thing, because, you get your companions. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know them. I've heard of a couple of people who had their best friend. They ended up on the same mission and being companions. Like, that's cool,
Rare.
Rare. My wife's brother got to serve with his brother. They, came out.
Wow.
His younger brother came out on a mini mission.
Awesome.
And served for 3 weeks. And, so like those are very rare instances.
Yeah.
But, you get, I remember I had one companion that we really didn't get along too well, but, we're friends now today. We've talked about it, and it's just, but finding something that they are there, because they're doing the same thing you're doing. They're spending 2 years, they're out there too. We all come from different backgrounds, but you can always find that common ground, especially with a companion, and try to find that one quality. I remember on my mission, I got to share this now, but I had one elder, and he was my companion, kind of goofy, but I remember we were in the nastiest apartment on my mission. It was the grossest. I didn't even like touch in the shower. I'd have my feet slippers on, and I'd still be at an angle, and I'd just get showered and get out of there. But I didn't even want to clean it because it was so gross. I remember one P day, he was like, I want to do a little cleaning. I'm like, all right. And we had stacks of paperwork from like years and old pictures of stuff and teaching material, and this apartment was gross. And I remember waking up, I was like, okay, you can do that. I'm going to go take a nap. It's P day. So I took a nap and I woke up. He had that place spotless. He had 12 bags of trash. We went and hauled down to the dumpster. And then I remember I was like, I went in my luggage, and I don't know why I was a pack rat, but I was keeping everything I could from the beginning of my mission. And I was like, I don't need this. This is ridiculous. So, but I think it's important, like, outside of cleanliness, they all provide something spiritual to getting out there and teaching, the people that's who you're there for, like, you're going to be working together, but you still got to get out there and preach and teach. And what were some of the most or what you'd like to share spiritual moments of like teaching and getting to bring somebody into the waters of baptism?
So I'll qualify this, Mike. I served in South America. I served in an area where lots of baptisms happened historically, right? I didn't have an astronomical number of baptisms. I'm proud of the work I did. I had some good leadership stuff I did, but it wasn't one of those missions where we were hitting triple digits in baptisms. Right. But the one that stands out for me, we started teaching this man and his wife. He was a taxi driver, a little bit elderly, and eventually their grown married daughter jumped in, and she had a husband who would sit in the corner. And this guy was a federale. He was a federal police officer. And so kind of looked the part, right? A little bit intimidating.
Right.
And he would just kind of observe. And I think he, in his mind, and I don't blame him, was, what do you got my wife into here? I'm going to just make sure that this is all above board. And then slowly over time, he joined in the discussions, and was a participant and listening and taking part. And there was as we approached the baptismal date, he had never accepted baptism as his in-laws and his wife had. And it wasn't until I think the day before that he came up to me and he said, "Hey, Elder Nielsen." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Would you have room for me tomorrow?" And I said, "You bet we would." His name was Ricardo Rodriguez. And he told me, he said, "I've really been struggling with this." He said, "I haven't been as gung-ho as my wife and her parents." He said, "And I was really searching the scriptures last night." And he said, "I was reading he said he randomly opened his Book of Mormon, and it fell to Alma 38, which is Alma the Younger, kind of giving some counsel to one of his sons. And it talks about, in fact, let me go ahead and read this as long as we're doing this.
All right.
So he just randomly opens it up, and he reads this verse, and it says, "And now, my son Shiblon, I would that you should remember that as much as you shall put your trust in God, even so much you shall be delivered out of your trials and your troubles and your afflictions, and you shall be lifted up at the last day." And like 3 verses later, it says, "And now, my son, I have told you this, that ye may learn wisdom, that ye may learn of me that there is no other way or means whereby man can be saved, only in and through Christ. Behold, he is the life and the light of the world. Behold, he is the word of truth and righteousness." And he said, it was made very clear to me that what I needed most in my life was Christ, and that I was hearing this truth from you guys on a weekly basis, and I want to be part of that. They had a child on the way, and just kind of starting off his life. Right. And it was a really moving experience for me, that our efforts were helping people, and were bettering their lives, and all that sacrifice and the challenges we're going through. And just to see Ricardo and Sandra, as his wife, enter the waters of baptism, that was really, really special for me. Humbling.
Yeah, especially when you thinking this whole time, like you said, he's sitting in the corner, kind of just eyeing you, like, who's this white guy sitting here talking about Christ or whatever, but he's soaking it in the whole time.
Yeah.
And his heart was open to it, and God
had a plan for him.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't see it, we don't know, we don't, and even in the weeks that we're teaching, we don't know in between our visits what's going on, and how Heavenly Father's working on him behind the scenes. And you never know people's journey, where they stand in life, and bam, it was his time. And we were just instruments to share that with him.
Yeah. Isn't that what we are? Yeah. Let's just say, like, for instance, maybe he may not have entered that day in baptism, but it was still that approach. And, he was still maybe would have had that in his, that you're setting that seed.
Planting seeds. Yeah.
Yep. We talk about that, planting seeds, and that's really what it is. Like you said, baptisms, you might not have had a lot, but that's not what the mission's about. Yes, we want to bring people to repentance and into the waters of baptism, but that's not, like, if to me, it's like, if you're just going there and you feel like you got to baptize and that's going to quantify your mission, then I think you've kind of failed.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I hate to say that word, but really, you're out there showing people, like, hey, what we have is the fruits of the Spirit, and that Spirit is what is going to testify of the truth. And what I love is that Scripture is, it says, "Trust in the Lord." And this is my 4th podcast, and very early on in this, but everything has been coming down to, it seems like, trust. And making sure you have trust as a missionary, or even the convert or the new person coming in the church, or even investigating, is putting that trust in the Lord. And once he did that, he was like, "Hey, I know you didn't talk to me, but I'm ready. Let's do this." That must have been very special.
It was, because it was unexpected. He kind of made a late surge there.
Yeah.
But it was very gratifying.
Yeah. And that only makes them stronger. I think that's something, like, you're sitting there, and that whole time he's just soaking it in like a sponge and ready. So, that being said, with the Spirit, how, what are some ways that when you guys were out there teaching, and I'm asking this in a way like, how did you maintain that spirit when you taught? Because and the reason why I'm asking it is I made a point, and because I had my first discussion, I remember it was great. We had the spirit, it was very strong. And then the next day we went, the guy had some questions, and all of a sudden it turned into this, like, my companion, who was very smart with the scriptures, like, it became a proving point, and it kind of lost that. So I wanted to make sure, like, okay, and he was a great companion, don't get me wrong, very knowledgeable, but I wanted to make sure, like, look, I'm not here to Bible bash. I'm not here to, if we're going to get into trying to prove each other, I'm cutting this discussion off and moving on, and maybe come back later and discuss so we can keep that spirit. How did you maintain that spirit when you were out teaching with people?
I think what you've mentioned is really important, that in the moment, that it's a peaceful, loving, cooperative atmosphere. When you first, bring up that question, my thought goes to, what are we doing ahead of time? Are we waking up when we're supposed to wake up? Are we, praying together? Are we organized and doing our scripture study? Are we seeking, the Lord's favor as we head out as His representatives? And then kind of, have we done what we're supposed to be doing so that we can then be aided in the home? That's kind of what I think of is setting the stage. Were we messing around? Did we do stuff we shouldn't have been doing? And then maybe you're not putting yourself in the same, the same
mindset
setting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a very, make sure you are doing those things. Like, it seems so elementary, just a basic, like, hey, did I get, it's a rule, wake up on time, wake up at 6 or whatever it was. And then did you and your companion do scripture study, or did you look at the discussions? At least in our time, did you memorize the discussions, or learn them also? And were you prepared?
Yes.
To, when you stepped out that door, like, it might seem trivial, like, I know this, I don't need to, but did you do it? And then when you step out that door, you're ready. Yeah. You're ready to teach, and you're ready to, I guess, accept that spirit. Because if you're not, and you probably noticed this, the missionaries who weren't, you knew that they weren't probably waking up on time or doing the simple things. You always go back to the, what do we call in the church, the not seminary, but primary answers, and then, you got your stuff that your mission president puts out there. Was there anything specific that your mission president that was kind of unique to your mission that kind of made, like ours was, even though we're American, English speaking, or coming from America, we weren't allowed to speak English in our apartments, even when there was nobody there.
Did you have my first mission president? I had two mission presidents that split almost a year for me on either side. And my first mission president was hardcore, was intense, very, very intense. And we could not, I'm going to admit this, Presidente Lozano's deceased. That was one mission rule that I just could not keep. Two Americans behind closed doors,
it was hard,
could not communicate in their native language with each. I could see out on the street. I could see in a bus or a store. But man, behind closed doors. So we had all kinds of, we could only shop on P-Day. Yeah. The one area where he was a little more lax, and again, it was my era and my mission, was we didn't have curfew. We weren't real strict on our timing, because between a siesta and a lot of the distances we had to travel. If a man of the house didn't come home until 9:30 at night, well, then you teach them at 9:30 at night. Right. Doesn't matter what the White Bible says. And but other than that, my first mission president was extremely rules oriented.
Oh yeah, that's how mine. I only had one, but he was that same way, and and it was hard. You're right. Behind closed doors, it's hard when you're two English speaking native. Like how do we communicate? It was like
I spoke English.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Presidente.
I think our mission president knew that, but I think he knew that hey, if you at least try, that language would come.
I think that the spirit of the law was don't offend people. Don't be just these cocky, rude Americans.
Exactly.
So I would never in a public setting.
Yeah. Yeah. When you said that, I immediately thought of like another rule that my mission president said: love the people. Did you feel that same love for the Argentinian people?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You couldn't help but, right? And it's like my second country now, and I adore that country and all of those great friends that I made, and some of whom I not many, but some of whom I still have contact with today, thanks to Facebook coming decades later. But yeah, I fell in love with them almost immediately. There wasn't much not to love. Particularly the children. I have a soft spot in my heart for the children.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I was the same way though. Like I adore Portugal, love Portugal, and Africa because I went two different areas. But Cabo Verde, I just loved both of them. Like we were talking about earlier, it could definitely go back, But reality is, it's I'm American. This is where I'm at, and this is where I got to be. Can always dream.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you, now, how did your faith and your testimony begin to grow on your mission, or how did it amplify already what you might have already had known, or does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll choose to answer it the way I'm interpreting it. I learned a lot about my Savior, Jesus Christ, on my mission. I grew up a spoiled, entitled, American with very little problems in my life, other than, my childhood being a little bit chaotic. But, in my teenage years, I had everything I ever wanted. And I was put in this situation where I viewed people who had truly had tough times, and I saw that how they lived their life, and those that would turn their attention to their Savior were blessed, and they could deal with really difficult problems. They got to navigate through that because of the church and because of their beliefs and because of their adherence to commandments and belief in Jesus Christ. And that was something that I didn't pick up as a teenager in Utah, right? I needed to be outside and experience other cultures and just situations before I could truly appreciate that he changes people's lives, that he in every aspect of their life could bring them comfort and joy, even if not prosperity and wealth.
Right.
And that changed a lot for me. That was a lasting life lesson.
Well, and it changed you, like you said, like, you grew up in a, what you said, privileged, or like you had what you needed or whatever, but you still had room to grow yourself.
Absolutely.
And you let it help you grow, and I think that's the lesson for most people is like, if you let it, my wife always says, what is it that you say? You're always willing to, if you're not learning, what? You're not growing, and it doesn't matter, like you've served as a bishop, and I only know you as bishop now, and you're always growing. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
You can be the stake president, you can be the prophet, and you're still going to grow there as long as you allow it. I think if you kind of stop that, then
I started to chuckle when you started talking about this, that I grew up, privileged in a good situation, but still had something to learn. I'm sure if my companions were watching this, they would get a great kick out of that, because they saw me, and I wasn't even the man, and I still have a long ways to go. But, you show up as a 19-year-old cocky, ignorant boy, and I had so much to learn and so much growth to go through. And the mission gives you a lot of that, a good step up, and then the rest of your life you still keep growing. But boy, howdy, I can't imagine that 19-year-old who stepped off the plane in Argentina, how much I thought I knew and how good a person I thought I was compared to what I could be.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what it is. That's the beauty of the gospel. It's not meant to keep you at one level. It's meant to keep you going.
Amen.
And growing, and almost just like, you say his name was Ricardo?
Ricardo.
Like you're just a person in the corner, and now he's, enjoying the church, and then, it's just, I think it's amazing when you hear these stories, how much individuals grow, how much you brought something somewhere to a country that was not America, that you had to find your way, no GPS, no cell phone, a computer back in those days probably didn't even have the capacity of the cell phones today. And yet you had to use that spirit, use your knowledge to get to where you needed to be.
Can I tell you a story about that?
No, yeah, please.
I feel like a lot of the stories that I have stored up in my mission have to do with travel, but my first transfer. So our mission was big. At the time I served, we had the largest mission in the world area-wise, so mileage. This is before they opened up some parts of Eastern Europe. So we had transfers that were plane flights. That's how far they were. So my first transfer came, and I have to qualify this because I couldn't believe some of my best friends served stateside, and they would tell me stories about, transfer day, and you go to the stake center and you stand in a circle, and it's like, okay, your new companion's with you, and they go, that was so different than what we went through. We would get like a telegram or a note from the branch president's kid who had a telephone, and it would say, Elder Nielsen's transferred to this area, go.
Right.
Basically.
Yep.
And so my first transfer was from kind of the north part of my mission, very far down to the south. And the total mileage was just a little shy of 800 miles. And when I was talking to the mission prep course, I did a little math. I mean, that's further than Pueblo to Salt Lake or Dallas or Kansas City. I mean, it's a journey.
That's a travel.
Yes. And, it's my first time, so I'm starting to master the language a little bit. I'm 6 months in, I think. And you just jump on a bus. There were supposed to be 4 of us by the time I got to the next city over. Only 2 guys showed up. And so the 2 of us took off, and the first leg we knocked out about half of it, about 400 miles. So we went to the afternoon to the evening, and that's where he got off. That was his end destination. So the whole rest of this journey, I'm by myself. And the next leg of the journey, I went about 200 more miles. Again, I'm traveling down the coast of Argentina, and and right now it's through the night, and it was so cold on this bus. And about 4:30 a.m., I get to Comodoro Rivadavia, was the place called, and there was a bus terminal, and we get there at 4:30 in the morning, and everything's closed. It's just a dark bus terminal. So I've got all of my luggage, right? And I go and find a kind of a corner, and I was so tired and cold, and I just kind of I fashioned almost a seat out of my luggage so that I was touching each part of my luggage in case I fell asleep. I didn't want somebody to take some of it. And I was that way until about 7 was when they started to open parts of the bus terminal. And I could inquire about my next leg. So I was starting to go inland. And they said that there was a 9 o'clock bus leaving. They ended up canceling that, and it wasn't until 1. And so at that point, I somehow called the district leaders in that town, and they came and grabbed me. And I remember crashing at some apartment and getting a couple hours of sleep. And then I bought a 2 o'clock ticket to the next city over. And so from about 2 to, 4 o'clock, I got to the next place. And it wasn't until I was there that I realized I was now out of money. At least Argentine money. I had some backup dollars that in Argentina you could pretty much always exchange because of the value. But the problem was I'm in a bus terminal with all of this just luggage. I had way too much luggage, I'm convinced. And I actually hid my luggage kind of underneath some stairs. And the only thing I could think to do, I had a $10 bill, was to go down the street and ask each store owner if they would exchange my money. And I got about to the 3rd store, and I got a guy to exchange me some Australes and ran all the way back, found my luggage still safe, and bought my ticket to the next town over. And I was so exhausted and just still kind of spooked and scared that on that journey, and this is a true story, I'm up against the window seat right here, and I've crashed, and I wake up. He stops the bus, and I wake up, and I look outside. So basically, we're in the right-hand lane, and there's a sidewalk, and then the side of a building, and there was a little placard about this big that said the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm here. How long was I sleeping? And I grab all my bags, and I stumble through the front and get off. And it's not till I'm on the sidewalk the first time that I think, is this really my destination? Like, I didn't hear a town said, nobody nudged me or anything. And so right before he closes the door, like, I stop him and I asked where I am, and I was not in my city.
You were in.
And I had to grab all my stuff and get back on the bus and just be that guy, right? That dumb American walking down the aisle, get back in my seat. And so we finally make it. And this is kind of where you're talking about no GPS and trust. And I get to this little teeny town. It's called Las Heras, Argentina. It's a little, I don't know why people live at the bottom of Argentina. Well, I do know there's oil down there. But it's kind of desolate, and it's cold, and it's harsh. And there's this little teeny town, and there's no bus stop, and there's no companion waiting for me. And all I could think to do, and I'm praying the whole time, let me get to where I need to be, let this to work out. And before he stopped the bus, was I noticed we were coming into town, I just asked him, I said, a thought came to me, and I said, when you see Mormones on the bus, where do they usually get off? And he said, oh, right up here. And so I kind of knew that I was on the right track. And he stopped, and he was pretty kind, and he said, I think you have a church down that way.
Yeah. So
I at least kind of had a vague direction of where a church might be. And he pulls away, and now I'm in the middle of, I'm at the bottom of South America, all by myself with my stupid luggage. And I've just heading down this intersection. I had to leave half my luggage because I couldn't carry it all and just left it on the side of the road. And about a block and a half in, there was a proper church of LDS church. And I hurried and hid my stuff in back, went back, got the other half, hid it in back. Of course, it's locked. Nobody's there. I don't remember what day. It's like a weekday afternoon. And I don't even know if anybody's expecting me, to be honest with you. And only thing I think of, I hid my luggage, and I said, I've just got to start asking people if they know Mormons.
Right.
And I went out to the front street, And the second person I asked actually was a man who worked next door to the church at a photography store. And he said, yeah, he said, I think I know the leader of your church. I'm on my lunch hour. Let me take you there. And I was like, great. So I get in his little Volkswagen thing, and he drives about 6 or 7 blocks and pulls up in front of this this humble little house with dirt front lawn, and there's a man on the porch and some kids running around out front. And I step out of the car, and he says, Elder, there you are. We've been waiting for you. And it was the branch president.
Yeah.
And I said, thank you. And after, I don't know how much time we spent getting to know each other, he drove me to our apartment, and there was my companion who was, happy to see me. But we didn't have a way of communicating, and you just kind of had to make your way. And there was a lot, you brought up earlier, trust. It was just, look, I'm where I'm supposed to be. Yep. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I think Elder Holland has a quote, if you're on the Lord's errand, you're entitled to the Lord's help. Right. And he's going to get you where you need to be. But it does take an enormous amount of trust and just guts to go for it.
To go do it. Yeah. And then you learn so much through that too. Like, a journey. I mean, think about it. Like we're all on our own journey. We all have different, and just that alone as an analogy is, hey, if you trust and put your faith in the Lord, you're going to find your way. Sometimes the path gets a little crazy.
Yeah, it may not be smooth.
Right. But you're going to get there, and I think that's what most members and also, youth that are planning, like, hey, he's got a plan for you. Yeah. It's going to work out. And then I got to ask too, being all the way down there, kind of switching a little bit here, but like going all the way down to the southern tip of South America almost. What was that like? I mean, you're literally, I think, isn't like the Antarctica right across the is it the Bering Strait? Is that right? Or
I don't know what the waterway is.
I can't remember. But
so our mission, where South America stops, Chile kind of ends, and then South America has a little bit of a curl, and there is actually a town down there in Ushuaia called Tierra del Fuego, Land of Fire. They make a lot of electronics down there. Yeah. I think the Argentine government cuts them some tax breaks, so Sony has plants down there. I never served down there, but I was in that province, and you're talking penguins and super cold. Because again, my brothers think, oh, you served in Mexico, you were hot the whole time.
That's what I thought.
It was freezing. I wore gloves and a scarf. Only time in my life I've worn a scarf was on my mission. We would bundle up because I was actually down there during the winter, and but it was neat. It was I got to experience, different areas, different climates on my mission, and places that I would never, if I weren't a member of this church, if I hadn't chosen to serve a mission, I would never get those kind of experiences. So, that was neat.
Yeah, and that's true. I think that's really true for America too. Like I talked to my brother-in-law, Jared, who first episode, and same thing. He was like, I went to Oklahoma, but I went to places I would have never thought I'd experience in the States.
So I have one more travel story. Yeah. That has to do with the South Pole. So I'm on my mission, and I guess I haven't mentioned this yet. My family moved to New Zealand while I was on my mission.
Oh, really?
I got a letter in the mail that said, hey, we've got some news. We had a garage sale and sold a bunch of your stuff because we're moving to Auckland. My dad had technically retired from the church, but they still wanted to use some of his expertise. So they would send him to where they're buying farms, and he would, he was a CPA who'd do their books for them. And Auckland has a lot of sheep farms, or New Zealand. So anyway, my folks and my youngest 2 siblings moved to Auckland. By the time I was done serving, they were in Sydney, Australia. So when it was time for me to be done with my mission, I wasn't flying to U.S. I was flying to Australia.
Really?
And that's where I gave my farewell talk in sacrament meeting. I was released from a stake president who I didn't know an Australian. But to get there, unlike, the 4 elders who were part of my MTC group, I had different travel situation. And at the time, there was a transpolar flight that would take you from the tip of South America across the South Pole to Sydney.
Really?
Actually to Auckland and then later to Sydney. And it went one time a week. Okay, one flight a week. And somehow between Salt Lake and our mission office, they didn't get the ball rolling on my visa because I needed an Australian visa. They didn't get that rolling soon enough, and it didn't link up with that day of the week.
Yeah.
So they had sent me up to Buenos Aires. I spent a couple days in this apartment where, like, when people from long distances would bus in to go to the Buenos Aires temple, they had like this house or this dorms. And I'm staying there, and the visa didn't come through soon enough, and I missed that once a week transpolar flight. And so instead of just that handy dandy quick little flight across the South Pole, instead I had to fly from Buenos Aires to, I think it was Rio or Sao Paulo, to Miami, to Los Angeles, to Tokyo, to Sydney.
Oh man.
And it took like, and at one point I crossed the international date line and gained a day.
Yep.
But it was like a 30-hour journey. At one point I was in a hotel in Los Angeles, I remember. But yeah, it was all this kooky travel, and I could have had this shorter flight across the South Pole. But
Yeah.
you don't think of how close, South America is at the very bottom.
Right. Yeah.
But
No, you don't.
That's where I was.
Yeah. And, I think of journey is what your mission sounds like.
Yeah.
A lot of journey and a lot of growth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was a lot of just learn to adapt.
Yeah.
Don't be, if I was more autistic, and needed, structure, it would have been difficult because things were always just going to kind of be what they were.
Yeah. I mean, you had to put that trust and figure it out.
Yes, trust.
Like, hey, I got to get this going. That's amazing, though, to be all that, especially going back. Like you said, it's just an easy flight going south, but you had to come all the way back around.
Yeah. Basically, you traversing the whole globe.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you could have said you've been to the South Pole.
Exactly.
So now you get home, and then how is, your mission, how has that played a role in your life today? How has that shaped you think, into the man, the father, the bishop, the person you are?
I think it solidified my my commitment to my covenants, to the gospel. I came back from my mission, and I was all in. I don't know why I haven't doubted a lot of things that people doubt, not only in this religion, but probably in all religions. But I haven't, and I would just, again, it's what I mentioned earlier, that once I saw the difference in the gospel, or the difference the gospel makes in people's lives who are following and keeping covenants and trying and progressing versus those that don't, because they're going through the same trials, right?
Yeah.
But the ones who are yoked to Christ have it better, have more help, have more comfort, have, their shoulders are strengthened to carry the burden. And that just convinced me for the rest of my life that I was on the right path, that what my parents had taught me was the best route, and to do that, to follow their pattern, to, get married to an active LDS girl, get married in the temple, to further my covenants in this religion. And it just kind of solidified all of that for me and took me from a boy to a man. I talked about, I probably didn't mention it, but my GPA after my freshman year at USU was horrific. I was on academic probation.
Right.
And I come back and all of a sudden I'm kind of mature and I take life a little more serious and my head is screwed on straight, as my mom would say. And all of that is because of my mission. And it made me a man. That's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think, my wife and I have talked about that, where it's this transformation where you see, even when I was planning to go on a mission, or at least talked about it, that was kind of the conversation that everybody had. It's like, you're going to come back a totally different person, and at least you should, If you don't, then you might have missed something along the way.
Well, and let's look at it from a secular lens. You're going to get life experience just traveling the world in any capacity.
Yeah.
Even if you just went backpacking across Europe after high school, but then throw in all the spiritual growth. You know?
No, it's true. Yeah. I mean, people that go out and see, I'm a firm believer, and I did it because I grew up, my parents, all my family's military. So I grew up in the military, went in the military, lived in Guam with my grandparents, Germany, Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, all these different places, Thailand, and you just see a whole different aspect, and you have such a greater appreciation, for the world. Yes. And I think for the people.
It opens up your world.
Yeah. And I think, you kind of get out of this like tunnel vision that I think most, not to get crazy with it, but here in America, you get this tunnel vision of this is the vision of, I guess, what we are or whatever. What I'm trying to say is, but then once you go out and you widen your lens, you see that there's a whole
get out of the bubble.
Get out of your bubble. Exactly. And the world has so much to offer. And I think it, honestly, it brings unity. It brings, unification, whether you join the church or not. I think you have an understanding for people who are suffering or maybe having some struggles. And I'm sure you saw that as a bishop, and as a bishop, how did, what would you say, I guess I'm going to add the same question, as your mission with you, as being a husband and father, how did that also shape you to be a bishop, when you were called?
My service in that calling was the closest thing I can compare to a mission.
I've heard that.
It's interesting, that you've put those two in the same question, the same sentence, because that all-encompassing just, once you put on that name badge, once you're set apart and have that mantle, that's your world, man.
Yeah.
That you're on a different plane and you're just focused. Serving as a bishop wasn't quite that, right? But boy, you have this instant lock-in on the members of your ward, your congregation that you're focused on, and the amount of time that you're, doing activities that are benefiting them and trying to help them. So here's the way I like to say to some of the current missionaries is, you're tithing 2 years of your life to God. You're setting aside everything. Girl, car, education, job, money, friends. And you're just saying, okay, Heavenly Father, for the next 2 years, I'm going to do this. And I'd done that. I'd enjoyed it for the most part. I cherished it. I had great experience with it. So when it came time that a stake president's asking me, hey, for the next 5 years, will you take on this big responsibility? Okay, I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
Now I had a lot to learn still.
Right.
But it was the same idea. It was, I'm going to commit to this and I'm going all in. And so that was helpful to me. Again, the mission allows you to step away from yourself. And this is what I tried to tell my sons who served was, in fact, I wrote it, in the airport. I gave them a little, envelope, little read this on the flight thing, but I gave them something that would fit in their handbook. We say white Bible, but it was our mission handbook. And I made sure the size would fit right in there so they'd always have it. And it was kind of my fatherly advice to them. And it was, look, for the next 2 years, you're going to be scared. You're going to be anxious. You're going to go through crappy stuff. But you're there for Jesus Christ and to serve other people. Forget yourself, okay? And not in a bad way. And I made this clear. There's going to be tons of people praying for you. Like, mom and dad are just the least of it. Ward, grandparents, extended family, friends, people you don't even know. They're gonna have all this heavenly help. You focus on them. You forget about Elder Nielsen for the next 2 years, and you're going to do wonders. You're going to become this awesome instrument. And that's what the mission really taught me was go serve other people, step outside of yourself. And that's where that cocky kid who I talk about who landed in Argentina started to transform into a less cocky man.
Right.
Was just because you're serving other people and it's not about you anymore. No, it shouldn't be. And maybe there's varying levels of adherence to that in missionaries. But if you're doing it the right way, you're not worried about yourself. God's going to take care of the rest,
Yep.
Just focus on the people.
Yeah. And that was President Hinckley's message. I remember one of the conferences when I was on my mission, or it might have been before, his dad told him, forget yourself. Get out there and serve. And I had kind of a similar experience with my mission president. I remember I was having some things going on personally and stuff. And I remember going to my mission president and I was wanting a hug and like, oh, everything's going to be good. And, President Costa loves you and all that's great, but he said the same thing. He said, Elder Magee, you need to forget yourself and serve these people. They don't need Brother Magee. They need Elder Magee.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I was mad. Initially, I was mad.
Oh, yeah.
I was frustrated.
It's not easy to hear. Like, it wasn't easy for Hinckley.
Yeah. And then I remember, and I've shared this, like, it was almost like a movie. I was shaving the next morning, looking in the mirror, and I was like, oh, he's right.
It sunk in,
and I was like, this makes sense. Like, and then I was like, okay, that was the hard love that he gave me, and he knew like if I was to open up to what he said, things would, work out, and I think that's, it's not going to be easy. And it's not meant to be easy. If it was easy, then it wouldn't be worth it really, but it's, those challenges, those journeys that you had to go through and still maintain the faith and that trust, in the Lord and go through all those journeys. And as a bishop, how would you prepare young men and young women or guide them to, especially ones I would say that maybe might be kind of 50-50 on it, or what are they going to do? How would you, obviously, don't need anybody personal, but how would you, prepare or help them to want to serve? And Rye Ward, everybody, sir. I mean, Rye Ward is just special. That's where,
In that heavenly ward I served in with your beautiful wife. I would say first and foremost, I had established relationship with the youth of, they knew 100% that I loved them, that I cared for them, that I would do anything for them. And once that relationship was there, then they could approach me with hard things. Then they could come to me with doubts or fears or uncertainty of serving, And once that door is open wide, then, okay, Bishop Nielsen's my ally, and he's going to help me. And if I don't want to serve, he's still going to help me. And he's going to be there for me and love me. But it was just a lot of just loving them, being there for them. We didn't really go hard on, firesides or discussions about it. Now, in my everyday language, I would be very forward of, someday on your mission, when you're serving, to the young men.
I think that's important.
Yeah, I wouldn't really leave it much doubt about it. You're going to go and you're going to be amazing and you're going to change lives. But the most important for me was just that they knew for certain that I was there cheerleader and their advocate, and I could help them through anything. And we had some youth who went from unsure to being in the field, and that's an awesome thing.
Yeah, and especially I think that's important for the youth and, future missionaries to know that the bishop is on your side. He's not there to hinder you from going. He should be there. Once, like you said, you got this mantle again where you're serving the people, you're serving the youth.
Yeah.
They're the future leaders of the church, and you're there to make sure that they can get out there and be worthy. But hey, whatever the case may be, you're there to be their advocate.
So I had an experience with a missionary who did not leave during my time, left before I got that call, and came home before their scheduled time. And I called them in, and our first sit down, I made that very clear. I was like, look, I don't care whatever else happens when we're talking here. I want you to know I'm on team your name.
Right.
And I am 100% with you, want what's best for you. How can I help you? And this young person just got married in the temple. They ended up giving basically a homecoming talk in our ward, when most people, were unsure, just the whole situation. But as a bishop, you're there to love everybody, zero judgment, and just you're kind of taking the Savior's place and treating people the way he would. And it should be all about love and support always.
Yeah. And I think a lot of youth, especially today, I think support is a big thing. A lot of kids, I think with the technology, like you mentioned earlier, it's great, but at the same time, it can be kind of, the arrow is just coming at you.
It's Satan's number one vehicle.
Yeah.
Into your kids' lives.
Yeah.
My kids' lives.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's, not even just the kids, even the adults.
Yes.
we're not impervious.
No, they're not.
We're still got to be just as strong, but for the youth to know, I think that the bishop is, because I've heard youth like, I don't want to talk to the bishop. And it's like, well, you shouldn't be scared. The bishop really wants to talk to you, and like you said, they love you, because we know. I've never been in that capacity, and I've seen it, and nor do I want to be. But I see that the bishops that I've been under, like, man, the love they have for the youth, because they just know they are the future men and women, future leaders. They're the ones that carry this church into the future. And you got to set those standards. And like you said, I think it's important that you were very deliberate on how you would talk to them too, like when you serve, or and there was no doubt. Because sometimes I get internally aggravated when I hear parents like, oh, I'm not gonna, I don't want to push them to do it. I'm like, well, you should still talk to them about it. Yeah. That's me. But, and that's just because the way when I joined the church, my wife's family was all about missionary work, and that's all I heard. Even people who didn't serve, I remember they were the bigger advocates. They would come up and be like, I didn't have an opportunity to serve, but man, from what I've seen and gained, testimony of, or seen people come back, like, what a great experience you're going to go have, and it was kind of like, wow, this person who missed an opportunity or didn't, or maybe came in the church later,
afterwards,
whatever, but they know the importance of that missionary work. And I think it's, pretty central to the church, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Well, is there anything else that you'd love to share that you could think of?
I want to tell one more story.
Yeah.
And it goes along with, maybe it helped me to build my trust. So I'm in my first area, and we had these loose mission rules about, we're taught in the MTC, and the White Bible says you're never alone, right? on my mission, that was impossible. So I'm 2 months in, I'm green, and my senior companion has to attend an out of town conference. Again, it's a little weird. One's leaving and one stays.
Really?
And it's about, he's leaving in the afternoon, and if all goes well, he's going to be back the next night. So I'm looking at 24 plus hours alone. We have 4 discussions set in that time frame, and I'm like, dude, what am I supposed to do? Like, what? You can't leave me.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're fine. He said, here's what you're going to do is you're going to get a boy from the ward, and you're going to keep all those 4 discussions, and you're going to keep the work going, and I'll be back, and we'll go. I can barely speak Spanish, right? So we go to the next town over where the district leaders were, and that's where the bigger bus stop was, and that's where he catches his bus to wherever he's going. And that bus ride home, I don't remember the distance here, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, was one of the scariest times of my life. Okay, so now I'm a brand new, snot-nosed, really just a kid.
Yeah.
And I don't speak this language. I probably have a heavy dose of homesickness. The one person who I'm relying on is now, I just watched drive away.
You drive away. Yeah.
And I'm on this rickety bus in the bottom of South America, just all alone. And oh my gosh, it was on my shoulders. It was heavy. And I'm worried about Elder Nielsen. I'm focused on myself, and I'm wallowing. And this is going to sound kind of dumb, but the last few blocks before my apartment, the bus stopped right in front of our apartment, and I found myself singing a hymn, but I wasn't singing real words. I was inserting my own words to this hymn, and I was saying, I don't have a companion. I am all alone.
Right.
I am all alone, and I don't have a companion. And the bus stops, and I'm humming this to myself, and I get out, and I'm standing across the street. I'll never forget this, standing across the street from my apartment, and in an instant, the words changed to that hymn. And I had to look it up later, right? And I didn't start at the start of the song. It started in the 3rd verse. And it said, "Fear not, I am with thee, O be not dismayed. For I am thy Lord, thy God, and will still give thee aid." And it's like the world stopped. And I think for the first time in my tender life, I realized that the Holy Ghost just stepped in and helped me. And I went from all this sadness and alone, and in an instant I knew God was speaking to me. Now, I wasn't hearing a voice, I never have, but through the words of a random hymn. And I tried to prove to myself later, oh, you heard that somewhere. Somebody put that in your mind, and I didn't.
Right.
And he chose the exact couple sentences of just letting me know you're not alone, Elder Nielsen.
Right.
We've got you. You might be a little bit alone physically right now, but angels are helping you, and it's going to be okay. And my whole being just calmed down, and I was able to, man up and take care of my business. But that little experience in Cinco Saltos, Argentina, was just this sacred little heavenly time for me when I realized, golly, God has us, and He's got my back, and no matter how bleak things get, and whether that's the next, 20 months of my mission or the next 8 decades of my life, I've never forgotten that little message that I got of fear not, I'm here. And that was, golly, transformational in my life.
No, and how wonderful it is, the gospel, when you think of Ricardo that you shared, and you just opened the Book of Mormon to the scripture about trusting in the Lord, and then you just this hymn, and it both just resonated, and like, okay, everything's gonna be okay, and the Lord has a plan, and from missionary work to bringing those into the church, or even just planting the seed, He's there, and He knows you individually.
Absolutely.
Which is an amazing thing to think of. We all go through trials, and some of us have it better than others, whatever perception is, but He's still there, and He knows each and individual, and He loves each of us individually, which I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then one last bit before we end here. One thing that I've been asking everybody that I interview, and the reason I've been asking this, because I've been getting this question when we have the missionaries over for dinner, and it's happened at least a handful of times, and they always ask, Brother Magee, Sister Magee, how do you guys stay active, or how did you stay active after your mission? And my wife and I always talk about this. Like, I was really no question, so I don't know. It was just like, I just knew I was going to go to church. I was raised religiously, and church was just my thing, and I just figured that's just what I do. That's my life. But what would be some advice that you would give these returned missionaries as they come home to continue on the path and understand that, Lord still loves you and you still have a purpose?
So my number one bit of advice would be, and this might not jive with some others, go to church. Like, I know the fallback might be, keep the habits from your mission, mm-hmm. scripture study, personal prayer, and personal prayer is huge. But there's some to be said for stay involved. It's hard to keep your covenants. It's hard to progress when you're by yourself, when you're alone in your room, when you're isolated. There's something about the community of church. And I say that being fully aware that there are people who may have bad experiences in their right. congregation, or may have reasons why, sitting in a chapel is difficult. And I would say, look, if you can do nothing else but then sneak in the back door and sit in the very back row, and I don't care what you look like. I don't care how long your hair is, what kind of piercings or tattoos, or if you smell like smoke, if you're wearing shorts and sandals, just go. Just be there. And if you're a member of this church and you're eligible to take the sacrament, take the sacrament. Like, yeah. Don't miss out on taking the sacrament because of XYZ reasons. And serving in the leadership positions I have, there's a downward spiral once you start stepping away. It gets harder and harder. If you can do nothing else but just go for a half an hour and take the sacrament and leave, just do not physically pull away. And that's probably a lot easier said than done.
Right.
But once you start to distance yourself, I don't know, Satan, there's a shame aspect. There's an embarrassment. There's a big hurdle of, okay, now I've missed 7 weeks. Mm-hmm. Now people look weird when I show up the next time, and then they're going to ask me questions. And just, if you can have some involvement, and if you're a college student, if that's the family home evening in your YSA ward, if that's the ward activity where you're going bowling, just stay involved somehow, because that pulling away, and right on the heels of that would be, keep a relationship with Jesus Christ, and be prayerful, stay connected with heaven in addition to your congregation.
Yeah, and that's a very, I think, important piece of advice, that showing up and just being able to feel the Spirit from Heavenly Father, and yeah, there might be, like you said, might be some things going on with the ward, the people, I don't know, but I remember, and I'm just gonna my wife and I, when we were first married and we were in Louisiana, we went to this ward, and they kept inviting Mel every month. We were there 6 months, and every Sunday it was like, "You gonna come to Young Women's?" And she's like, "We're married and I'm pregnant." So it was like, "Do you not remember who I am?" Like,
she's very young looking.
Yeah, you know, it was like, and I'm 19 years old, or you know, so so there was, and we started talking like that. You know, it was like, they don't even care. They don't even know who we are. So why am I going to show up? You know, and then we had to realize, look, we're doing this for us.
Yes.
And that's what's important.
Yes.
And they might not recognize us, but maybe we're not saying hi enough. You know, there's always two sides of the coin, you know, but like you said, if you can just show up and feel at least that spirit, take the sacrament if you're eligible, you know, and just being there. You know,
but you nailed it, Mike. It's about you.
Yeah.
Church worship, and that's what we're doing on Sundays. We're worshiping is between you and your Savior, Jesus Christ.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what judgy person 2 pews over thinks of you. And I realize we're human. There's some difficulties there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be uncomfortable. But if you can keep your focus on, this is about my eternal progression and my relationship with Jesus Christ, that's what's important. Not how perfectly we're dressed, not if we, you know, have paid our tithing the same as the person that, all that is just.
Yeah, you know, you got to get there. And one thing another bishop that I know, he always says, church is where you need to be. And, you know, I remember real quick, because I think it's funny, I spilled Menudo on my only white shirt. And the next Sunday, I didn't go buy one, so I just wore flannel and showed up. I was like, well, it's what I've got, but I'm not going to miss church, you know.
Good on you.
So, but and you have to have that. I don't care if people are judging me for, you know, for not wearing my white shirt and tie. Well, I don't know what to tell you.
That's on them.
Yeah, I'm here for me. So, like you said, worship is there for you. You know, and then everything else is for everybody else, service. But, well, Bishop Nielson, I really do appreciate you being here and sharing your stories and, and talking with us. Definitely learned, you know, tonight, journey and trust was what I got out of the discussion. And once again, thank you very much and for being here.
Thank you for what you're doing. This whole podcast, I've told you this off camera. I have a ton of respect that you would step into this space in a very serious and dedicated manner and try to put some positivity out into the world and to, you know, look at this mission service for what it is and how much good it can do. And the world needs that, and keep at it. And shout out to Mel for running the cameras.
Thank you.
Good on both of you.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching this episode. Please subscribe, like, and hit that bell to be notified when new episodes come out. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you.